everyone, I'm Dayna from Love Oswaye, and I'm here with Karen Comer, who is debuting her first novel, Grace Notes, next month in February. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Dayna. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Now, Grace Notes, I believe, comes out 1st of Feb. Is that right?
Yes, very soon.
Oh, very close. Only a couple more weeks to go. We're filming this in January. So the first question I like to start with is kind of your elevator pitch. So tell us what Grace Notes is about.
Okay. Grace Notes is set in Melbourne in 2020. So it starts just before the pandemic, and it's about two creative 15-year-olds. There's Grace Finch, who is a talented violinist, and she wants to make music her career, but her parents, particularly her mother, would prefer an academic one. And then there is James Crux, known as Crux, who is an aspiring street artist. It's illegal to paint in Melbourne, especially when you're under 18. So Crux's parents want him just to repaint the family's garage wall, finish school, and then work out what he wants to do. And Grace is filmed playing her violin in a deserted tram. Crux sees it, he decides to paint her, and then Grace sets out to find out who painted her, and then the first lockdown hits.
Excellent. Now, it is set in 2020, and throughout the novel, we do gradually see that creeping effect of the pandemic, and you've got, the COVID rates, that deaths and new cases and things like that throughout the novel. And I was actually surprised how much this affected me reading it. Because I started going, oh, yeah, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So were you writing this in 2020, or has it been something that you wrote after the lockdowns?
So I started writing it in February 2020. I'd had the idea of writing about a teenager who wanted to be a street artist for a while. I started writing it in February. I then kept seeing an image of a girl playing her violin in a tram and decided the story was about Grace as well as Crux. And then the pandemic hit, and I just kept writing my story. And then all of a sudden, I noticed during the first lockdown that I was writing the lockdown into the story as it got to probably March 2020, maybe April. And I had no intention to write a pandemic book, no intention at all. It just crept in because I was writing about Melbourne. And it was almost like, oh, well, this is really interesting. Okay, I guess I'll keep going with that. So that's how that worked.
That's fantastic. I love that it sort of came in without your intentions for it to be there. Fantastic. And restrictions, I think, are a big theme within the novel as well. I mean, it's not just the pandemic lockdown. I guess there's those restrictions that Grace is feeling with her mother not approving her music, and there's restrictions around the painting. So that's a really strong theme, I guess, for you that you're writing in.
It was about these teenagers who were not only experiencing their parents' restrictions, but the government's as well. So I think there's a small bit where Grace reflects on how, her parents had restricted her. She was only allowed to go to the supermarket, but, the government was also restricting her as well. She couldn't see her grandmother. There is a big theme. And I guess that's something that teenagers often feel, that, they want these big lives. And certainly Grace and Crux have big dreams for themselves. And sometimes I think it's hard for teenagers to have a bit of agency to be able to fulfill their dreams sometimes. So that was definitely a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that was certainly discussed a lot in the media as well. I think that impact of the restrictions on teenagers and their mental health and things like that, which I think, well, for me, that I thought, it hits hard because they are at that life stage where they are wanting to be more independent. And then, yes, they have a double whammy of restrictions coming down on top of them, and lots of social networks and things like that, because you do write about them not being able to see their friends and online schooling and all of those sorts of things as well, which impacted on
Well,
me.
it's such a formative years, aren't they? And
Yes.
there's so many firsts, and teenagers really missed out on those things. They missed out on, playing footy with their friends, and they missed out on school musicals and school camps and just hanging out at a friend's place, all the 16th birthday parties or the 18th birthday parties or the final VCE, gatherings and all those end of year rituals. They really missed out on a lot of those things.
Yeah. And I can certainly see this being studied, in 10 years' time in a school. And, teenagers then will be able to have this capsule of what it was like for these teenagers in Melbourne throughout that period, because, of course, those teenagers then won't have gone through it. They might have experienced it when they were younger, but they won't have been teenagers at that time.
No, and I was trying to showcase a lot of different experiences as well. That's why I put in the Corona choruses, which are online chat groups where different people are talking about their experiences. And, some people embraced making sourdough bread and some people never wanted to see sourdough bread ever again.
Yes.
Some people lost their work and some people were busier than ever with their work. So I was really, trying to experience or trying to show all of those different experiences of what it was like, and that they were different and they were all valid. And I guess, yes, thinking about, perhaps 3-year-olds now who might read it, studied in school in 10 years' time. Yes, show all those different experiences.
Fingers crossed. That they will be. Now, the other thing that really struck me, of course, that we've talked about yet is that it's a verse novel. So can you tell us more about writing in verse and your decision to write in that format? Was that, again, something you planned from the beginning, or you found it creeping in as you wrote, like the pandemic did?
I was always intentional about writing this book in verse novel. But it took me a while to realize that I was a verse novelist. I have a second book also coming out this year, a middle grade book, and I wrote that book 13 years ago. It started life as a picture book, then it became a middle grade novel, and it just never sung. It was just always a bit flat. And a couple of years ago, I was sick with the flu, couldn't do much, but I could still read. And I read Sharon Kernow's amazing verse novel, The Art of Taxidermy. And I think because I was a little bit sick and a bit daydreamy and I wasn't quite back in the real world, I read it and I thought, that is how I want to write. It was just the biggest light bulb that I've ever had. That is how I want to write. And so I rewrote that middle grade book as a verse novel. And once I started writing the first couple of chapters, I thought, this is how I want to write. So Grace Notes was always going to be a verse novel.
Fantastic. Because that had actually was going to be my next question, of saying, well, that there aren't that many verse novelists around. And, were you inspired by any? And I was actually thinking of that novel too, because it is a fantastic. Yeah, I was thinking The Art of Taxidermy. That's the other one that I thought of recently. So there you go.
Yeah. Yes, well, it's all thanks to that verse novel that I became a verse novelist.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, having written, I guess, that novel not in verse, and then you switched it over to being in verse, how is the writing process different for you, and how do you find it writing in verse?
I just like that I can write in a really lyrical way, but I can also be really sparse. I love that I don't have to set up scenes. I don't have to describe in great detail where my characters are. I can just do a few lines. I can write fragments. I found it really interesting that a while ago I received feedback that my writing had too many fragments in it when I was writing as a novel, and that I should take them all out. And once I took them all out, that book just sank. There was nothing left in it. So really, I write in fragments. That's my writing style. And that's where the strength of the writing comes from. And I love the playing around with writing a verse novel. I love hearing the rhythm or the beat. I love being able to repeat words. I love the visual elements of it. I love how there's a lot of white space on the page. You can align the lines, you know, to the right-hand side of the page. You can put one word on a line. You know, there's so much that you can do with it visually as well, not to distract from the message or from the words, but to enhance them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked that too, actually, as well, that there were sections that you could see the rhythm changed. I think particularly it was around when she's writing about the music, that I thought, oh yeah, there's things that are single words jumping out, that one line being a word, adagio, 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 things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very beautiful. And likewise, was it always a two-person point of view novel, or did that come in later?
I started off thinking I would just write about Crux, and then I just kept having this visual image of a girl playing her violin in a tram, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe that might be my next book. But then I kept thinking about her, and I thought, oh, well, that could be really interesting. I'll just play around. I'll just write a little bit about her. And once I started writing in Grace's voice, I knew that she belonged in Crux's story, and it would be a dual narrative. And I really liked that they both had these separate arts. You know, street art is so contemporary and so cool. And, you know, violin is often seen as being, you know, so classical and not at all modern. So I liked the contrast between their two chosen arts. And I liked how they were both big. They're both, you know, you spray painting murals on, you know, a building that's 9 stories high that so many people will see, and they're seeing it as you're painting. That's really bold and audacious. And standing up on stage playing your violin in front of a crowd, I think, is really bold and audacious too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Definitely the opposite of the restrictions that they were going through, that they, yes, wanted to explode off the page and live these big lives through their art.
Yes.
Is there a message that you really like young people to take away from the book?
I hope that young people will see some of their own pandemic experiences reflected back in the book, and that it's just that period of time where young people are moving away from their families but still need to feel connected to them, and they're exploring their own identities, and it is about working out where you fit in and where you belong.
Thank you so much, Karen. I've really appreciated both the book and also talking to you today. And so 1st of February, Grace Notes will be coming out.
Yes, Grace Notes is out on the 1st of February.
Much prettier cover than this. Is the advanced reading copy that I've got, which only shows you a snippet of this beautiful artwork.
Yes.
That is actually in the final copy, which I just thought was perfect for the novel as well. It perfectly captures the events. So thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about the book.
Thank you for having me, Dayna.